أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى أدرك الأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولهم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسكنا على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نأمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهدرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق أليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأكثر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق الأليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فاتحة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها اشفع لنا يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وصي الحسن ولخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله حاجات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا سادتي وموالي، إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله، وتوسلت بكم إلى الله، واستشفعت بكم إلى الله، فاشفعوا لي عند الله، واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله، فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله، وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله، فكونوا عند الله رجائي. يا سادتي يا أولياء الله، صلى الله عليهم أجمعين، ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين، آمين رب العالمين. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليًا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله رب السماوات سبع ورب الأرضين سبع وما فيهن وما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم يا كريم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع على لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي عظم الذنب من عبدك فليحسن العفو من عندك يا كريم. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. الله أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي وربي والسيد ومولاي فاغفر لي بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہ صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. حسین الغریب الغریب الحسین حسین شہید شہید الحسین. دہائی دہائی خدا را دہائی یہ دشت بلا میں ہے کیسی تباہی بہایا ہے کس نے یہ خون محمد قیامت یہ دھائی ہے کس نے لائی جوانوں بزرگوں کو مارا گیا ہے شہیدوں میں شامل ہے ننھا سپاہی کیا جشن برپا یوں اہل ہوس نے شہیدوں کے لاشوں پہ ڈنکے بجائے جلا ڈالے آل محمد کے خیمے سکینہ کے منہ پر تماچے لگائے جو بیمار تھا اس کا بستر نہ چھوڑا نبی زادیوں پر بھی درے چلائے اٹھی اپنے مرقد سے بنت محمد سیاہ شب کی چادر میں چہرہ چھپا کر گئی کربلا میں تو اس نے یہ دیکھا ہے بوسیدہ کرتے میں ایک لاش بے سر بدن سارا تیروں سے چلنی پڑا ہے لہو میں ہے ڈوبا ہوا سارا بیکر تڑپ کر وہ چلائی شبیر بیٹا لہو میں نہائے ہو سر بھی جدا ہے تبر کس نے مارے ہے سارے بدن پر یہ تیروں پہ کس نے جنازہ رکھا ہے؟ کہاں ہے میرا لال عباس بولو، میں پوچھوں گی اس سے یہ کیسے ہوا ہے؟ حسین الغریب الغریب الحسین، حسین شہید شہید الحسین، محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayatima Yujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. We'll all recite this together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's majlis. Par Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. صلى على محمد وعلى Mu'mineen, Mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. During the reign of the Abbasids, one of the most famous qadis and judges was Ibn Abi Du'ad. And he was a qadi and a judge during the reigns of Ma'mun, Mu'tasim, and Mutawakkil. During the reign of Mu'tasim, this qadi was once with one of his friends, Zurqan, and he began narrating a story to him. And he started off the story on a pretty depressing note. So he told his friend Zurqan, because Zurqan saw that there was some weird, a weird face, something was wrong with him. So he asked his friend, what's wrong? And this qadi, this judge of the Abbasids replies, I wish I had died 20 years ago. So Zurqan says, what happened to you? What happened today? He said, well, I'm feeling this way, and I wish that I had died because of what took place in a gathering in front of the Khalifa Mu'tasim. And all of this, meaning this feeling and my wanting to die and this embarrassment and all of this, was due to and all thanks to Abu Ja'far. And by Abu Ja'far, he means our ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad At-Taqi alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa And of course, we are commemorating the Shahada of our beloved ninth Imam tonight. There's a few different dates reported for his Shahada. Most reports say either the 29th or the 30th of Dhulqa'ad, hence why we're commemorating it tonight. And some other ulama report that it may have also taken place in the 5th or 6th of Dhul Hijjah, so still relatively within the same time frame. And they say that Mu'tasim had brought the Imam from Medina to Baghdad in this final year. So Muharram of approximately 835 Common Era. In that year, Mu'tasim had forcibly, just like he had done to the 8th Imam, or the Abbasids had been doing to all the Imams, forcibly had taken him from Medina and brought him in front of himself to Baghdad. And in that same year, in 835, so again, less than one Islamic year had passed, and that's when you see the Imam met his demise. So now let's continue this story. So this Qadi now, Ibn Abi Du'ad, is now blaming his bad day and wanting to die on the behavior of our ninth Imam. So his friend Zurqan says, okay, well, what took place? What happened? He said, someone came to the palace today, a thief, and he confessed in front of all of us, in front of Mu'tasim, that he had committed theft, that he was a robber. And he said that he wanted to have his soul purified through adhab and punishment. Now this sounds, I know, very strange for us because we're not used to this. Nobody, for example, would go to a cop right now and says, I was speeding back there. Can you please write me a ticket? I want my soul to be purified. But this kind of classical group of Muslims, they were like this. They saw the hadd and hudud and punishments in Islam as gifts. They saw that as a way to, clean their soul. So sometimes they would go, and we have many stories like this, where they would go to the imams or they would go to the Khalifa of that time and say, this is what I did, I confess, now I want the punishment to happen. See, even these mujrimeen, these criminals, people who are committing sin and ma'asiyah and guna, even they understood their aqidah was still good enough that they said that, I'd rather be punished here in the way that God wants than in death or in barzakh or, God forbid, in hellfire. Anyway, so he says, yes, I need to be punished for this. Now Mu'tasim knew the general punishment was, okay, he's a thief, he has to have his hand cut. But he had never performed it before. And now all of his, fuqaha, his judges and scholars are there. He says, okay, well, where do we cut this robber's hand from? Where do we cut it? So there was a group of different scholars, and this was normal for the khulafas. They would always have a group of various different scholars around them. So some of them said it has to go up to the elbow. So from that elbow, that's where it has to be cut. Basically, pretty much almost the whole arm, right? Half the arm at least has to be cut. That was their definition of hand. So Mu'tasim says, okay, well, what's your evidence for saying that? And they quoted Surah Ma'idah, Surah 5, ayah number 6, the famous ayah that talks about wudu and tayammum. So the part there where the part about washing the hands is mentioned, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, and your hands up to the elbows. So this is our evidence that the whole area, again, from the fingertips up to the elbows, so that elbow, the marafiq, it has to be cut from there. That's where you do the cutting. I said, okay, fine. There was another group, and Mu'tasim goes to this qadi, the one who's narrating the story, Ibn Abi Du'ad. He says, okay, well, what's your opinion? He says, my opinion is that no, not from the elbows, but from the wrists, meaning just the hand. That's all you have to cut. He says, okay, well, what's your evidence? He said, my evidence is the exact same as theirs. What do you mean? He said, same thing. In Surah 5, in Ma'idah, same ayah number 6, after you go through the discussion and the command of wudu, go down to the end of tayammum. And what does Allah say? فَتَيَمَّمُوا سَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. So perform tayammum with dirt. فَأَمْسُحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ. No, wipe your faces. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ مِنْهُ. And your hands. He said, and we all know that the tayammum you do with your hands is just from the wrist down. That's all you do. So that's my evidence. That hand here, yad, is just the hand, meaning from the wrist down. Okay? Both of them are using the Quran, and they're both coming up with different evidence. So there was this kind of back and forth there. Again, you have these different opinions that were given. One was elbowed, cut from there. Other said, cut from the wrist. Mu'tasim then turns to Imam al-Jawad, alayhi salatu wassalam. And he says, what's your opinion? They've given theirs. Now, I want yours. Imam says, look, they've already given their opinions. Just excuse me from this. Which requires its own analysis. It's not the subject for tonight's discussion. But we see, especially when the imams were around these hostile personalities, they actually did their best not to reveal their own opinions. Why? Because, I'm going to fast forward through the hadith. As we know, this same individual, this qadi, who's about to get embarrassed, he later on, after all of this is done, then afterwards goes and complains to Mu'tasim about Imam al-Jawad, and this is what eventually leads to Imam al-Jawad being poisoned by Mu'tasim because of the jealousy of fake ulama like this and fake qudaa and judges like this. Anyway, so Imam says, look, they've given their opinions, just excuse me from this. Mu'tasim swears to Allah, says, no, I swear by Allah, you have to give your opinion. You have to give your fatwa. So, the Ayyamah don't take swearing to Allah lightly like this. He says, since you swore an oath, then fine, I'll give my ruling. He said, both of these opinions that these other qudat, these other judges and ulama have given, both of them are incorrect. He says, the correct opinion is that only the fingers need to be cut. Not the elbow and not from the wrist, just the fingers need to be cut there. So of course, Mu'tasim again says, okay, fine, they also brought their proofs, you need to do it as well. So first, he says, because firstly, from my grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he said, as-sujud ala sab'a a'da. That sujood takes place on 7 different places, right? The first is wajh, meaning the face, meaning forehead, wal yadain, so your 2 hands, meaning the palms, wal rukbatain, the knees, and then rijlain, feet, but in that case we mean the big toes, basically, right? So those are our 7 places. He says, okay, so these are the 7 places where sujood must be done, and that's the way it's performed. So, okay. So then secondly, now we go to Surah Al-Jinn. Again, the Imam is giving the second part of his evidence. Surah Al-Jinn, Surah 72, ayah number 18. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ. Masajid are for Allah. فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Do not do dua to anyone together with Allah at all. He says, you see, Allah is saying masajid, meaning places and things reserved for sujood, belong to me. That's what Allah is saying in the Quran. If you cut from the elbow or from the wrist, that thing which belongs to Allah is gone. The thing which you said, that sujood, which is reserved from Allah, you've gotten rid of that. And things which belong to Allah, you have no right of cutting. And this was the dalil. Mu'tasim said, I accept this dalil, and that's what they did. They had cut the fingers of that individual. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So for the second part of our discussion tonight, I want to just analyze a few parts of this. Now, I think many of you have heard this narration and this story before, right? And especially when it comes to these imams, especially the 9th imam, we know them famously by these kinds of stories, where they're put in these difficult situations, right? In front of other speakers or scholars or ulama, judges, and they end up debating or making other people look like fools because they don't know what they're talking about, right? We have the famous debate between the imam when he's a child and the other judge, Yahya ibn Aktham, right, where he talks about the ihram and all those rulings. That's the most famous one. I think most of you know that, right? And there's a few other riwayat as well, which always talk about a debate that the imam has with somebody. So this is a fadila, a fada'il of the Imam, that at all these different junctures, when everyone else tries to put down his maqam and his level, he shows just how wise and how knowledgeable he actually is. Okay. And again, that's why also even the Sunni ulama praise and say the fada'il of the Ahlul Bayt based on stories like this, which also exist in their books. But now here's the problem. Some ulama have an issue with this story. And I'm not talking about, the progressive liberal type ulama. I mean traditional conservative ulama. And they say that there's an issue here. And so for example, if you look at the tafasir of Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadullah, rahmatullah alayh, Ayatollah Nasir Makaram Shirazi, Qaddasallahu Sirru, they say that, look, there's some issues here with this story of Imam Jawad explaining things like this. So firstly, these ahadith which narrate this story, right, about the Imam speaking to this judge, speaking in front of the judge and all this stuff happening, and then giving this quote from Rasulullah, then quoting the surah or this ayah from the surah and saying this is the reason why you can't cut from that, you can't cut anything else. You have to leave it because it's for Allah. That's the sujood part. I said, okay. So these ahadith, there's a few different issues. The first one is about authenticity. So they will say, like many ulama, that these are weak. If you do find a chain for them, they're very weak. Or the other argument is that some of the books where this story comes in, there's no sanad, no chain whatsoever. Say that that's a very difficult thing to do. Now again, we're not here, I'm not going to go through rijal and diraya, any of that stuff. That's not the point. They say, okay, let's actually accept the fact that all this is authentic. The story, meaning the chain and all this, is authentic. Does this actually stand up to rational, logical scrutiny? And if you remember, this has been our theme now for the past few nights. We've been talking about, are we able to examine ayat of Quran and ahadith and riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt using a rational method? And we gave certain examples where it happened, and certain examples where it can happen. Over here, many mufassirin say, look, we are going to give you a very clear proof why this is there's a serious issue going on here. So I want to share this with us, with all of you. If you can recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. On Thursday, we started talking about what makes something rational and logical, and what makes something pseudo-rational and pseudo-logical. Meaning, we can easily say an argument is rational or logical, but we have to actually look at what's being said. Anybody can say, yeah, I'm saying something logical or rational. Okay, well, are you or not? You can't just say the word. We have to look at what you're presenting. And one of the ways you can test if somebody's ideas, if their claims, if their beliefs are rational and logical, are with two key components. That their ideas, especially if you take more than one of their ideas, meaning a whole bunch of set of claims and beliefs that they have to have the qualities of coherency and consistency. They have to make sense altogether. If you take one idea of theirs and then you take another, but these things contradict one another, well, it's going to be a problem, right? You see that, for example, Islamophobes, so those who are anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic, one of their quote-unquote claims against Islam is that your Quran, your book, is full of contradictions. It's not consistent whatsoever. And that's why a lot of people will examine other people's religious texts. When we, for example, look at the New Testament or even the Old Testament and their version, we say, look, there's a lot of inconsistencies there. So how can we follow something like that? So this is a normal way that we judge whether somebody's being rational and logical or not. If you give me different ideas, they have to work together. They have to work simultaneously. They can't be separate. So, and I'll give some examples later on in terms of contemporary issues, but let me focus on this story first. You say, okay, let's say we accept face value, authenticity, hadith, and all that stuff. The claim here is that the Imam is giving a reason for why fingers are cut instead of the whole hand or the arm. And the claim is that if the hand or anything else is cut, that area which we need for sujood, which must be on the floor for sujood to be sahih and correct, is going to be cut. If that's cut, then you can't perform sujood. And the ayah in the Quran says, Masajid, there meaning places of sujood, are all for Allah. So you can't cut those. So, okay. So the principle here, your Imam, or what we're thinking the Imam is saying, is that anything which is a place of sujood, any of those physical parts, right? Forehead, palms, knees, and big toes. All of those are for Allah and they can never be cut. Right? That's what the principle is so far that we understand, correct? That's why he's saying can't cut the hands. Okay. Now, most of you probably won't know this because it's, who studies like punishment law in Islam. When a thief gets caught the first time, now again, like I said, there's a difference of opinion among Sunnis and Shias. Sunnis generally say it's the hand that's cut, and this is where Shias say fingers. Now, what about the second time? The person, whatever, this punishment is dealt out, and now they get caught a second time. Repeat offender. Second time they're caught. Do you know what the punishment is? Sunni and Shia both, what do they say? The left foot must be cut. And there's a difference of opinion about where exactly it's coming from, but no matter what you do, some say it's the first half of the foot, some say up to the ankle, some say a little bit more or less, various ikhtilaf. That's not our concern. No matter how much, even if you take the minimum amount that our ulama, Sunni and Shia, agree with, the toes are all gone. If the toes are gone, the big toe is gone. If the big toes are gone, or at least one of them's gone, then what's gone? One of the masajid. If one of the masajid are gone, doesn't this contradict and now make the imam's argument inconsistent and incoherent? If the imam was saying that you can't ever cut a place that belongs to God, you can't cut the hand because you need that for sujood. Okay, imam, fine. Sunnis and Shias both agree. Repeat offenders, they have to have their left foot cut when they are caught the second time. So you're saying, okay, first time the Masajid Allah rule applies, the second time it doesn't, and now what are they going to do for sujood? So this is the reason many ulama say, look, this doesn't make any sense. The reasoning the imam is giving, or attributed to giving, doesn't make any sense here. So when a person has a complete understanding of Islamic law, of Islamic aqeedah, then they can understand, okay, is this rational or logical or not? Then they can say, okay, regardless of authenticity and sanad and chain and all that stuff, we can look at all the other riwayat, all the other principles in Islam which we have yaqeen in, which we're certain about, and hold that against this. And when we stand that to scrutiny, we see that it doesn't hold up. So when you look at this discussion, you can say, look, if that's the principle then, if the principle is that you can't cut a place that's meant for God, meant for sujood, then the law that all Sunnis and Shias use for the second repeat offender, then that can apply as well. But all Shias and Sunnis agree to that principle. So that means that there might be some inconsistencies here, which would lead ulama, like the two that I've mentioned, and a few others, to say that this story doesn't seem like it's believable. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, again, I don't want to go into the back and forth because some ulama have a response to this and they say, okay, well, regardless of that, we have a difference about maybe why cutting of the foot is allowed. Well, okay, maybe because he's a repeat offender, then that's not a big deal anymore. Okay, first time forgiven, second time, now maybe they're not allowed to read namaz anymore, something like that. It's a very strange argumentation, but some will give it. I don't want to get into that. Regardless of the authenticity, regardless of accepting this argument, the point that I wanted to address tonight was about this idea that we've been addressing in terms of rational, logical argumentation. When we are thinking about all these different issues which are coming up in our own local community and things which are affecting us, let's say, nationwide, and which are hot topics and controversial topics of discussion, when we're looking at claims, it's easy for us to take something, hear it, and believe it with, on face value. Very easy, especially when they're filled with all these buzzwords. But a real thinker, somebody who really wants to see whether a belief or a claim is actually rational, must hold it up against all the other belief systems and ideas that they have to see, are all of these ideas together consistent and coherent or not? So let me give two different examples, right? So, as I said, regardless of authenticity, a valuable question and analysis which comes out of this is a question about divine rights, or more specifically, divine property rights. So the imam here, again, if we're taking the message of this hadith, or even if we're just examining this ayah of Quran, that's saying, أَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدِ لِلَّهِ, that masajid are for Allah. Okay, well, what exactly is a masjid then? What does that mean? And I'm sure many of you, over the past few years, everybody's been offering their own arguments about what happens, what is a masjid, what is the fadila, can you do this, can you not do this? I've heard, since I've been here back and forth, from before I had moved here 2 years ago, up until now, I'm still hearing multiple different arguments. So that's one question. And the second one is this, is that Allah saying that masajid belong to me. Okay, well, what things belong to Allah and what things belong to us? Which things are His and which things are ours? Is this ayah saying that there's only certain things that belong to God and then there's other things that belong to us? Right? We have two questions that I think we need to think about. Now, we don't have too much time tonight, but I want to start by looking at least some of these questions, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You know, these questions I believe are important because they're still subjects of debate between all of us right now. Right? The first one, obviously, about the idea of a masjid. Right now, people are using this as a fact, saying, if you don't come to and pray and attend a masjid, then there's something wrong with your iman, or there's a problem with you. A masjid can't be left open. A masjid must be attended, etc., etc. Right? They're quoting a few different things like this. Like, okay, is that all that it is too? Well, we'd say, okay, let's look at some of these ahkam in Islam. Let's look at all the riwayat. Let's look at everything else. Are these ideas coherent? Are there some situations where we see the Ahlul Bayt not attending Masajid? Are we seeing some places where, for example, you have companions speaking to the Imams, like one who came to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And he says, we told the Imam, I don't attend the masjid, I don't go. But I desire to make one in my house. I want to set aside a room in my house. Can I do that? Am I allowed? He said, yes, you can do something like that. Just show ihtiram and do that. You can create, in one of your rooms, make that specifically designated for salah. I know that many of us may do something like that too, right? In your homes, you have some area, maybe not a room, but just some designated area, which maybe is just for salah, or sometimes it's an azakhana, something like that, right? You put your alams and things like that there. It's basically a dedicated space just for the remembrance of Allah and Ahlul Bayt. So if we take away this principle from the Imam, that's a good thing for us to do. Now, if you notice in this hadith, and there's others, but I'm just giving you points to think about. Not saying go here, this way or that way. That's not the point of why I'm bringing this up. Just saying that, look, the Imam could have easily said, no, why are you doing that? Why don't you go to the masjid? He said, no, make one at home. It's okay too. And we have many other riwayat in that regard. At the same time, we have on the other side other riwayat which are very harsh. For example, some from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where he said that if you are Ahlul Masjid, that has its own definition. If you are a person who is jarul, a neighbor of the masjid, and you don't attend, you're not going for praying your salah there. One narration says your salah is useless, it doesn't count, meaning your salah at home. Another narration says that then, he's like, I wouldn't be surprised, or don't be surprised, if someone comes, puts firewood in your house and burns your house down. It's a pretty harsh hadith. So we have a lot of different narrations on the subject. Now, this is the problem, is many individuals who want to get involved in these conversations and discussions, about fada'il of masjid and attending, or other people giving the reason for not wanting to attend. The question is, are your ideas fully coherent or not? Have you examined every single ayah regarding a masjid? Those who are quoting, oh, masjid has this fadila, it can't be left alone. Okay, do you also know that there is a such thing as masjid al-dirar? That there are places that can be a source of fitna, and the prophets and imams have said, no, these places either stay away, or if possible, destroy them. Okay, so what are you going to do with this riwayah and these types of riwayat? Or at the same time, as we just mentioned, a lot of the riwayat also mentioned that no, you can pray in your home or don't attend. And they didn't know it was attend masajid as well. So how do you reconcile that then? You have to have a system for that. And the same way for those who decide, okay, you know what, I'm not going to go, I'm going to stay away. Okay, fine, that's your choice. Maybe you have reasoning. But is your reasoning actually coherent or not? When you look at these other riwayat which mention, don't leave a masjid alone, don't do this. So my point is this, is that when somebody's making these claims and wants to come to this decision and opinion, okay, how coherent are you actually making your argument? Or is it just filled with a bunch of buzzwords and feel-good ideas? And this is just about masjid, and I give, simple ones. We can even go, again, here's another one, and once Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was speaking to Abu Dhar, rahmatullah alayh, and he started offering fada'il of Masjid al-Haram and Masjid al-Aqsa. And then after this, he tells Abu Dhar, حَيْثُمَا إِدْرَكْتَكَ الصَّلَاةِ, whenever you're anywhere, and the time of salah comes, فَصَلِّ, then pray right there. In the context where there are masajid available, that's the context here. And then he explains to Abu Dhar why this is the case. He says, وَالْأَرْضُ لَكَ الْمَسْجِدِ, the whole earth, everywhere is a masjid. in the general meaning, a masjid, every place where sujood, where Allah is worshipped, that's a masjid for you. So some will take this as a wide meaning of masjid as well. Say, look, it's not just a specific building and some Arabic words are recited. There's a wider meaning to this idea as well too. Again, not to discount the idea of a building, but to say that there's other definitions and discussions as well. In this specific ayah as well that we talked about in Surah Al-Jinn, ayah number 18, right? أَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدِ لِلَّهِ. Over there's a huge discussion among the ulama about what this actually means. There's maybe, I think, 6 or 7 different opinions about what masajid means. One, we already mentioned, which was related to the whole story, which you have riwayat from various different imams and the Prophet. They said the masajid literally means the place where you do sujood, meaning the physical body parts, right? Forehead, palms, knees, and feet. They said that's masajid. I said, okay, that's one option. There's another one that says that no, masajid are physical buildings that have been designated. I said, okay, that's another possibility. But you even have deeper discussions among some of our ulama and urafa as well. And they base it on these ideas. This one comes from Imam al-Qadim alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Who is reported to have said in Al-Kafi, أَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدْ هُمَ الْأَوْصِيَاء. Awsiya? Wasi? Well, what does that mean? And then Imam Rida explains in his own hadith, هُمُ الْأَئِمَّةِ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامِ. The A'imma alayhimu salam, they are masajid. They are places of worship. What do you mean places of worship? And in the tafasir, they explain, they say, look, there's different levels when words are used in the Quran. There are, deep layers of meanings. One layer happens to be any place where you can do sujood. In your home, you do sujood there, you have a designated place, that can be considered a masjid. Again, maybe it doesn't have the same ahkam related to janabat and all that, but it can be, to some degree, has to be shown respect, right? Because it's a place where Allah is being worshipped. And the Prophet and everybody else is saying that the whole earth, everything is meant for Allah. Everything is a place that you can worship. And the reason they give is that other religions, like Judaism and Christianity, for example, or at least the Jews and Christians of that time, they reserved their specific types of prayer just for synagogues and churches. This ayah, they say, when people had asked the Prophet, he said, no, the whole earth, any place that you can come and pray there. Anywhere that you are, go ahead and pray. Again, as long as it's not ghasbi and, all the ahkam there. Okay, so that's one level of a building or a place that you're praying. Fine. Then beyond that, we have this idea that the a'imma, they are masajid as well. Well, how is that? Mufassirin explain. Sujood is the deepest and most profound type of ibadah. They say it's the type of ibadah which destroys Shaytan. Why? Because it's the one that he failed. His test was sujood. And Shaytan says, I hate when Muslims and mu'mineen perform sujood. Why? Because it reminds me of my failure. That position where you lower yourself, where you humble yourself, where you tell Allah, Allah, there is nothing besides you. I am the lowest of the low. I am dirt. I'm nothingness. Ya ayyuhan nas antum al-fuqara ilallah. Humans, you're nothing. Everything you have is dependent to Allah. Everything belongs to you. That's what sujood represents. So if the a'imma are our sources and role models for guidance, they say then they become masajid as well. Why? Because they show us how we humble ourselves. They show us how we get to Allah and how we perform our ibadat as well. Even if you look at this hadith, the one we mentioned about the 9th Imam, even if we assume its authenticity, it's interesting that the Imam, before, because everybody else, all the other Sunni scholars, they just gave ayat of Quran, right, as from Surah Ma'idah, to prove what is a hand. Imam Jawad in this hadith first mentions the hadith of Rasulullah about what are the places of sujood, and then he mentions the Quran. And in other riwayat and other debates, when they ask, what do we do when we're confused about something? Imam Jawad says, when you have a matter which you're uncertain about or which seems like you can't reconcile it, you need to compare it to both Kitabullah wal Sunnah. Kitabullah meaning the Quran and the Sunnah. Now why is this point important? Because right now, we have many of these speakers and scholars who are bringing up, again, these issues, progressive liberal issues, whatever. They say, if something seems like it doesn't make sense, take it and just put it up against the Quran and that's it. Whereas Imam al-Jawad is saying, no, it's not just the Quran you're holding it up against, but you also need to know the Sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt. Know the Sunnah of Rasulullah and the A'immah alayhimus salam, because they are Quran and Natiq. They're not separate from the Quran. I mean, have you forgotten Thaqalain? Why is it that all of a sudden Muslims now have turned into these Quraniyun? Right? The Quran is enough for us. We don't need the Aimma. Hadith are all fake and they're weak. Where did this come from? This is not our belief. We need the Quran and the Sunnah to be able to work together to help us understand the rest of the riwayat, as well as the ayat of the Quran that we don't understand. This is the system that we need to employ. And you see that the reason why there's so many debates and discussions about this topic, and a contemporary one which I want to mention, is because that the people who are engaging in these discussions, when they try to offer their own ideas and claims and beliefs, usually it's not rational. It's not coherent. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why people with incoherent arguments are just, blasting each other back and forth. Saying, well, no, masjid is this, no, masjid is not this, and this is that, and this is that. And when we come to this contemporary issue, and we're talking about divine property, now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, this is something that's on everybody's mind, and people have been discussing it since Friday. Muslims, of course, are discussing it as well, and Shias are discussing it, and they are flooding the internet with insane, foolish, ignorant comments. The worst, ideas that I've ever heard in my life. I mean, that's how social media works, right? It's a bunch of individuals who just claim that I have an opinion, so I have the right to share it. No, that's not the case. And this is the reason why there's so much disagreement and fighting and all this stuff. Why? Because people who are not qualified to enter these discussions and disagreements, they start arguing. Look at these two narrations from Imam al-Jawad alayhi salatu wasalam. He's reported to have said that if the juhala, if the jahilin, if they had performed samt, sakit, if they were silent, then no people would disagree with each other. Right? It's usually only in a gathering or in a conversation or online, in the comment section, whatever. When you see people who have no idea what they're saying, when they go back and forth, that's what takes away from an actual ilmi, knowledge-based conversation. When two people, or ulama who know what they're talking about, or two scientists, or people who are well-versed in their field, when they discuss it with one another, you see that usually there's no ego involved there, or shouldn't be at least. Because it's, ilm, it's knowledge-based. When you don't know what you're talking about and you engage, then you're making everybody else seem like a fool. Because all your comments are based on half knowledge or pseudo knowledge. And the pseudo knowledge keeps, compounding over and over again. And the Imams also reported to have said that ulama hum al-ghuraba. Ulama are gharib. So what do you mean? How are ulama gharib? Because of all the juhala which surround them. And this is exactly the state of all the imams as well in the past. The reason why many of them couldn't come and explain, why even in front of their own Shias, sometimes they couldn't explain their rulings, was because of the ignorance that was around them. Even if you look in the past of our own ulama, there's this one concept that one of the academics has coined about reverse taqiyya. That some of our own ulama have to perform reverse taqiyya. Like, what does that mean? They mean that because Shias are so aggressive, they're so harsh sometimes, they're passionate, emotional, that even if their own marja gives them a ruling, gives them a fatwa, they say, forget it. You have this famous story of Ayatollah Burajardi, right, rahmatullah alayh, where people from all over, all of his muqalladeen, they came and visited him one year. And they came to him, they said, Sayyidina, we want your fatwa on tatbir, on qama, on zanjir zani, right? Blood matam. What's your fatwa on that? And he gave his opinion. He said, I don't allow it according to my thing. If you're at my taqlid, then I don't allow it. So do you know what this group that came from all over different provinces in Iran, they came to visit him in Qum. They asked him for the fatwa. He said, okay, if that's your fatwa, no problem. But then here's our reply. 364 days out of the year, we're in your taqlid, but on Ashura, we're not in your taqlid anymore. This is the reply of some Shias. Sometimes our own emotions get the best of us when it comes to these discussions, and that's why sometimes it's better we don't enter in the first place. Think about the conversation again right now about overturning of Roe v. Wade, pro-life, pro-choice, and all of these things. All of these ideas that I'm very surprised that Muslims are using the exact same phrases as these sort of liberal progressive commentators and pundits. My body, my choice. Is this Quranic language? Is this the language of a Muslim? My body, my choice, my rights. I get to decide whatever I want to do. Where is this from? Did you forget inna lillah, that you're Allah's property? Did you all of a sudden create yourself and you're in control of yourself? Where did this come from? You see, this is what I mean. Like, okay, let's just say, fine, you're in control of yourself. Then does that mean you can do whatever you want? So my body, my choice, right? Woman's rights. A woman needs to choose to do whatever she wants. I said, okay, how far are you willing to take that? Now, some of these ideas we're going to hold off on and explore it more, especially on the youth session on Saturday. We're going to explore this in more in depth. But again, we're talking about coherency. Somebody has this idea, Muslim, my body, my choice. Okay, fine. Are you pro-suicide? If you're saying my body, my choice, you should be pro-suicide too then, right? You should be allowed for people to perform euthanasia. A doctor should be able to, if somebody says, I don't want to live anymore, you should be able to do that. Or if somebody who has, let's say, whether they have a mental health issue or not, if they decide to cut themselves and harm themselves, they should be allowed to do that as well, right? My body, my choice. Or if whatever drugs they want to take, they should be allowed to do that as well, right? My body, my choice. Or if they want to sell their bodies for, various reasons, my body, my choice. How far are they willing to take this argument? If you want to be coherent, if you say my body, my choice, you can do whatever you want, then you need to give full freedom there. But everybody knows there has to be some level of restriction. So our conversation, the question needs to be, okay, who decides where these restrictions come in? Do you and I decide? It's us that know what's good for the body and good for the soul and good for society? Or are we saying that, no, ana min al-muslimin, I'm a Muslim. I submit to Allah. Allah is the one who knows what's good for my body, what's good for my mind, what's good for my soul, what's good for my emotional well-being, what's good for my financial well-being, what's good for society. Now, what that entails and what that looks like in the political sphere, again, that's a deeper discussion. But at least these talking points, we really need to think about it, how we're speaking about these ideas. And again, this is not just in terms of liberals, this is also some of the conservative Muslims as well, and some of the talking points they bring up. And, in terms of being pro-choice and pro-life, or however you want to say it. Because many don't know that, yes, in terms of the idea of pregnancy itself, the majority of the rights, according to our ulama, falls on the woman, the wife, the future mother. She has a lot of say in terms of, let's say, contraceptives and things like that. Most of the haqq and right on whether to use or not belongs to her, not the husband. But again, most people, they only know half their fiqh. So as one of the shuyukh said the other day, we say, ar-rijal qawwamuna ala nisa. Like, okay, well, do you actually know which way you're supposed to have enough knowledge to be able to tell people what they can and cannot do? Most people don't know their basic Islamic aqidah and their ahkam, but they're going around deciding what to do for other people. A woman or a man can do this or can't do that. My body, my choice, or my freedom, or whatever it is. So when we boil everything down, we'll see that most people, if you actually ask them about their ideas, whether Islamic ideas, whether their beliefs in the political sphere, most people do not have this coherency. And this is something that we need to start being able to use when we examine these Islamic concepts. Whether it's, again, locally, community related, like I mentioned in terms of this idea of masjid and going this place and that place. And again, the other concept we should remember, it's clear in the riwayat that a person, when they go to a masjid, when they go to a place where they worship Allah, they should come out better, right? Their akhlaq should improve. If a person who's attending the masajid and they're praying and they're doing the ibadah there because they believe that there's more sawab and thawab and whatever, okay, fine. Is this person also saying, but people who don't attend, there's a problem with them? Because I've heard, again, these arguments. They don't attend, they don't come to the masjid, so there's a problem with them. I said, oh, interesting. So now, you, individual, making this argument, you're attending, your akhlaq is supposed to improve, yet you won't even provide husn dhan for your fellow mu'mineen in the community, that they might have an excuse of why they don't want to attend. You don't want to hear them out. You see? If the masjid was actually a place where you're performing ibadat, you would come out a better person and give people the benefit of the doubt, if you really were for unity or whatever this word means to everybody nowadays. But if it's just a word you toss out all the time with no meaning, then again, it makes you feel good, you pat yourself in the back and you send a lot salawat, whatever, okay, that's done. But no, we have to make sure that there's coherency in all these ideas that we're putting forward. If we don't see that it's there or we're confused about it, well, then this is where the imams come in and they say, let us teach you. Come to the Quran, come to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt, come to the discussions of the ulama and learn Islam. And then you can begin entering these discussions, asking questions and critical thinking there. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Imam, after he was brought to Baghdad by Mu'tasim, as I mentioned, after this incident took place where Mu'tasim accepted, according to the story, the verdict of Imam al-Jawad, They say this Qadi who was telling the story, Ibn Abi Du'ad, became infuriated. And as he told his friend, this is why I wanted to die. Because I was embarrassed in front of Mu'tasim, the Khalifa, like this. So, according to the historians, they report and say, because of this, after the incident was done, he went back to Mu'tasim and said, do you know what you've done? Mu'tasim's like, how dare you speak to me like this? What do you mean? He says, when you took the fatwa of this person, meaning Abu Ja'far, our Imam, when you took his fatwa, you increased his maqam and the love that Shi'as and Muslims have for him. And now guess what? Because of that, they're going to rally against you, fight against you, and your khilafah will come to an end. You see, when some individuals, when they don't have enough information and ilm and knowledge to back up their arguments, then they have to shut everybody down using these sort of vicious attacks. And this is the way some of these, it wasn't the khulafa by themselves all the time, it was the people around them. And sometimes we have to be careful. The people we surround ourselves with may try to bring us down and not allow us to grow. And they say that Mu'tasim had spoken to Fadl, one of the wives of the Imam, and had convinced her to give the Imam some poison. And this poison had affected the Imam, much like the poisons had affected our other previous Imams, caused immense harm and a detrimental effect to his body and led to his ultimate demise. But mu'mineen, azadaran, I think there's a more difficult scenario, something from the childhood of Imam al-Jawad, which I think is more heartbreaking than even the Imam Shahadat. Many of you will recall that when Imam al-Jawad was once with his father, Imam al-Rida, performing Hajj or Umrah at the Kaaba, and he was only a few years old. Imam al-Rida was going and performing. And they say Imam al-Jawad, as a young kid, was sat down with someone who worked with him, one of his helpers. He was there with somebody, and he sat down near Maqam Ibrahim. And when Imam al-Rida had finished, he told his servant, he said, go get my son. No, it's time to return and go back home. But when the servant went to go pick up Imam al-Jawad was profusely crying. He was sad, he was depressed. And the servant says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Ya Mawla, why are you like this? Why are you in such a state? He said, I can't leave this place. I won't leave this place. And he would refuse. So the servant went to get Imam al-Rida. He said, your son won't go with me. You have to come and speak to him. So Imam al-Rida came to Imam al-Jawad, his son. He said, Bunayya, why aren't you leaving? What's going on? Why are you in this state? He says, Ya Abatah, Baba. He says, I saw the way that you were performing your Hajj. I saw the way you were performing your Tawaf. The way that you were performing it is as if you were performing your Wida, that you were sending your final salams to the Kaaba. That this was the last Kaaba, this was the last Tawaf and Hajj or Umrah that you were ever performing. And this led me to believe the fact that you'll be leaving us as well too, and that I won't be seeing you ever again. How can I leave this place when I know that this is the state that you'll be leaving us in? And Imam al-Jawad was consoled then by Imam al-Rida, and he took him, picked him up and tried to console him as best as possible. You see, Imam al-Jawad had that effect on the Imam, where he was able to hold his father one more time. And he was with his father for a little bit longer before he left. And when we remember this, of course, we remember another child of Imam Hussein, who didn't have the same experience, who also knew that her father, Sakina's father, Imam Hussein, was about to go away in the battlefield. When Imam al-Jawad is complaining to the Kaaba not to let his father go, Sakina is complaining to Dhul Janah, do not let my Baba go out with me. And before he's able to go out, she says, Baba, can I sleep on your chest one more time before you go? Let me lay down one more time on your chest before you leave. And they say one more time, Imam Hussein gets down from Dhul Janah. He lays down on the sands of Karbala. He says, Sakina, baby, ajao. He takes Sakina and puts her on his chest. And they both fall asleep together for the last time. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیرے خوشبو تو رہے تیرے بازو نہ کتے چاہے مشکی زچ دے یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا مجھ پہ ہے تشنہ لبی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی دھوپ میں تو تا شجر تجھ سے آباد تگر ہے برہنا میرا سر کیا نہیں تجھ کو قبر اے علمدار وفا اس بہن کو باخدا تجھ سے دارستی بری تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی آ گئی شام علم لٹ گیا اہل حرم ریت پر جلتی ہوئی ہو گیا تنگ علم پرس دینے کے لیے مجھ سے ملنے کے لیے آ گئے بابا علی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی کیا کہوں شعر میرے بیردہ ہم کو لیے یہ مسلمان سارے شہر در شہر گئے کلکتے کوفہ کبھی کلکتے شام کبھی اور رہا ہم پہ ہنسی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی کتنی بے باستی بہن اے شہنشاہ ہے وفا نام لے لے کے میرا جب یہ ظالم نے کہا ناز تاج جس پہ تجھے اب بلاؤ نہ اسے اور میں روتی رہی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی قید خانے میں قضا جب سکینہ کو ملی دیکھے کرتے کا کفن بچی دفنائی گئی اس کرینہ میں تیرا صورت ناد علی دکھ میں دہراتی رہی تو نایا غازی جبریدہ سر سے چلی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا पैदा सर से चली मैं सदा देती रही तू नाया गाजी।
सूरत al-Mubarakah al-Fatiha.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أختك زينب، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا إمام صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسحر الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.